welcome to Config. So excited to see you here, and thank you for coming out to my talk. But hello. All of us, with our different skills, ages, experiences, hopes, dreams, and fears, have seen this screen. Whatever we make, we start with something blank and untitled. What would you make? What's your instinct when you see this? Do you add some rectangles? Maybe you make a frame. Do you start typing some notes? Whatever it is, if you can, send a message into the chat. What would you do first? What would you make? How do you use Figma? As for me, I'm here at Config today to share some of the things that I've made. Through 5 stories of 5 files and projects, I'm hoping to expand your idea of what you can do with Figma. First, though, I want to tell you a little bit about me. My name's Ace, and I'm a college student. Through all the stories I shared today, one thing I want to make very clear is that I have never used Figma in a workplace capacity. It's always been in clubs and organizations. It's always been in teams of students who learn, teach, and create together. But above all, it's always been a bunch of kids having fun together. And this is not to say that you shouldn't use Figma for the workplace, because you absolutely should. And this is not to say that the work that we do as students isn't important, because it very much is. This is to say that across these stories, we're all doing this because we want to, because we're kids having fun together. So in short, I'm here to give you a 19-year-old's perspective on Figma and everything that you can do with it. And with that, let's dive straight into story 1, the Animal Crossing character maker. Through each of today's stories, the link to the accompanying file will appear in the bottom right corner. This file is bit.ly/figmaac. So I made this file 1 year ago, almost to the day. It's a component-based avatar creator made entirely in Figma, including all the illustrations. But why did I make this? Well, it's late March of 2020, quarantine just started, and somehow everyone I know and their mother got a Nintendo Switch and Animal Crossing. They're doing chores and catching fish and selling turnips, and I am having very intense FOMO. And 3 more things. I need to make a Figma illustration for another project. I'm going to lose access to Adobe Illustrator, and I'm really into making myself on Picrew. So these things combine into the perfect personal project. I get to 1, practice vector illustration, 2, get familiar with components, and 3, make myself an Animal Crossing without a Switch. So I got to work. I had a messy workspace with super low-res screenshots of the Animal Crossing wiki. I put this tiny photo of every single eye in the game and replicate each one. And a note on those slash names, this project all happened pre-variants, and I was trying to learn just regular components. Eventually, the file felt comfortable. I start drawing hairstyles on this maker frame, but I did restart them several times because I'd pull a line that was too straight or a curve that was just too sharp. I personally struggle a lot with getting discouraged when I draw, and one of my worst habits is erasing my work constantly. One perk of Figma is being able to just Control-Z one line instead of a whole piece, and being able to easily put something just out of my line of sight. I arranged my workspace in a way that let me keep track of my progress and clearly see my improvement. With basic asset shapes completed, I started adding color styles. Animal Crossing has 8 in-game skin tones, and with Figma, people would always have the option of adjusting colors to whatever they want. But having a variety of built-in skin tones is important regardless, which is why I decided to use color styles. To make these elements always meshing well together, I kept a series of frames with example facial elements on different skin tones, hairstyles, and hair colors. Setting these up also created a positive feedback loop that showed how each piece played nicely into a larger whole. I was slowly feeling more and more confident with the system that I was making. And then came the bulk of the project, making tops. Each base style of clothing had a unique silhouette, here in black, and initially I intended to just have solid colors and a few patterns here and there for each clothing style, as you see here. The maker had a clothing silhouette component with a nested style component to let you change outfits. But as I made those first few assets, I started having a lot of fun. I got a little carried away, and it kind of escalated into 65 unique assets. I really never planned to make so many, especially considering the nearly 300 in-game styles. What made me keep going was just how fun it was. That earlier frustration became less and less frequent, as all learning frustrations do. These 3 assets here were from the beginning, middle, and end of the project. As I practiced more, I was getting smoother curves and more organic shapes. I felt comfortable exploring shadow and blur effects, and I wasn't afraid of masks anymore. But that said, I can't say everything in the file was good practice, because it was not. If you dig in that file, there is some absolute garbage happening in the layers. There are a ton of masks, there's very few layers of meaningful names, and there's just an absurd number of groups. And honestly, all of that is okay. I was learning, I was designing things, and I was making tons of mistakes. But if you were to open up a sketchbook and it was full of mistakes, errors, edits, you wouldn't call it a failure. I know that now I'd be able to go back and clean it all up and make it better, and that's a great thing. So I think I best understand this project as treating Figma like a sketchbook. Whenever I draw, I'm learning by doing. I'm learning how to make art by making art. Avoid that temptation to erase what's not perfect, and instead, look at the progress that you have made, and above all, make a lot. So while that last project was very much for me to personally learn, this next experience is about brainstorming and creation with a team of 10 other students. Story 2 is about many months of collaborative work with IDOT. This file, bit.ly/Figma Chaos, is a gallery of highlights from our collaborative design environment. Since September, we've been using Figma to create marketing assets for our organization. But the catch is that, like many teams formed in 2020, we've never met. How are we building teamwork and genuine friendships? Well, to start, let's talk about what IDOT is. IDOT is a student-led nonprofit that provides accessible design education to high school students across California. I'm currently the director of marketing and lead our team of writers, social media managers, and graphic and motion designers to create content. And like I said before, our team has never been in the same room together. Instead, Figma has been our proxy. So Figma has worked out great as our primary illustration tool. Every asset that you see here was made entirely in Figma. I selected it initially for 3 practical reasons. 1, it's something that we all have access to as students. 2, sharing a workspace is really critical for our constantly evolving brand and visual identity. And 3, it's a better visual whiteboard than a text-based file. And once a month, we meet to have these brainstorming sessions for content themes. During one of these meetings, we had our first kind of team culture walkthrough, the hand slide. It was October, so about a month after we'd all met for the first time, and everyone's, a bit fresh, a little bit nervous, but they're excited to work. So we start our silent brainstorming time. In the last few minutes, someone drew a little slide with a start and a finish label, and then everyone, unprompted, started moving their hands through the slide over and over. And okay, it sounds kind of silly and maybe pretty small, right? But this was a huge breakthrough for me. Our brand new team was having fun together by treating this file as a proxy for physical space. And this was also the first time that we saw Figma as more than just a formal workspace, but also as a place where we can poke fun with each other. And since then, the team has embraced our fond label of chaotic good more and more. Our exhibit B here is dot voting. The first time we did it, one member doodled these small faces. Naturally, these evolved into strange but magnificent creatures populating our brainstorms. Though these screenshots may seem distracting, being silly together has honestly made our environment so much more supportive. We always get the work done because we value each other and what we do together. Simple in-between moments like these break down barriers and open doors for more genuine, non-work friendship. In the same vein, our graphic designers always do these pencil tool doodles. And again, while they could seem unproductive, they've led to both excellent theme ideas and team inside jokes that bond us. The team is always incredibly respectful towards one another when we're actively discussing, and we doodle in those in-between moments. It's like the equivalent of drawing on a whiteboard after class, or drawing doodles on your papers. Interactions like that are just really hard to come by when you can't be in the same room together, jostling the same notebooks around. And these synchronous doodle sessions have also led to sweet, small interactions like these. I found snippets of text scattered across all of our files, people coming on to post reassurance about an illustration, just giving support on an upcoming exam, or even just say, hey, hi, I see you at this file at 2 a.m. in the morning. It's small and it's sweet, and when you can't run into each other on the street, text boxes are kind of the next best thing. This is our marketing team at our meeting this past Sunday, and I really can't stress enough how lucky I am to work with them. They make incredible and beautiful work, and the team runs super smoothly, all thanks to them. My absolute biggest brag here is that people have told me they genuinely look forward to our meetings, even though we have them on Friday evening and Sunday afternoon on Zoom. And I can barely take any credit for that. It's because we formed friendships through these small moments together. This team works because we don't just care about the tasks, we care about the people doing them too. I best understand our IDOT workspace as a playground. It's fun, it's hectic, but it serves a purpose, and it serves it really well. Each part of our workspace and team has a particular function, the same way that everything on a playground has a particular function. The perk is that unlike a stereotypical office or library, other kind of sterile analogy, it's a place where we encourage fun moments in between the work because it brings us together. It's chaos, but it's thoughtful. This next story takes that analogy of a physical place like a playground and makes it a little more literal. Story 3, Welcome on the Glade with Blueprint, is actually about replicating a location and a tradition through just a file. The link is bit.ly/Figma Glade. This project was from September of last year, during the start of college students' first semester entirely online. Processes for school, work, and life all changed, and this file was kind of a test of how well we can adapt. I made this project for an org called Blueprint, where a team of student developers, designers, and external directors who support communities by building web and mobile apps pro bono. Blueprint has been really formative to not only my design career, but my college experience, and honestly, my life trajectory overall, and it's also where I learned Figma. Last fall, I served as the social chair and had the job of making people friends online. So we have this semesterly welcome event called Welcome on the Glade, where we all meet our newest members at scenic Memorial Glade at UC Berkeley. It happens the day after we prank call new members to announce that they're in. Unfortunately, the recruitment process preceding the celebration is inherently really stressful, which makes that first interaction all the more important. It's so critical that new members transition from feeling like an applicant to knowing that they're part of this community. The challenge of the event isn't about running a meeting, because we know how to do that. It's about creating casual closeness. Being a college club, friendships tend to form by running into each other on campus and just doing homework together. Socials, both planned and spontaneous, are important to fostering friendship and teamwork. Hearing that we were going remote was especially difficult because we knew we wouldn't have those physical interactions together. We'd be on Zoom instead. I went into planning this event trying to tackle the challenge of making people feel together when they're apart. Conveniently, though, Blueprint uses Figma to design our projects. Shout out to Emily Zong, who taught me Figma and taught the rest of our design team Figma as well. And most members already kind of know how to use basic tools. I decided early on to use Figma to supplement Zoom for social events because, like we learned with IDOT, it can be a proxy for our physical selves. In short, it's the closest and easiest way we could feel like we were on Memorial Glade together. If we can't bring ourselves, we can at least have our hand icons and a scrappy drawing of a green space. And Welcome has always had a few key traditions. First, we provide lunch for everyone, which we can't really do in any capacity online. Second, everyone introduces themselves one by one. And third, we have this icebreaker game where people compete to see who remembers the most names, and nobody ever remembers the rules ever. These were all pretty quick and dirty replications, setups that were made to be moved around and interacted with. Each went about as smoothly as I could have planned, and you can't plan for everything. And I mean, you really, really cannot plan for everything, because maybe I mentioned before, college students are kind of weird. I couldn't tell you why, but when the event started, members added the crab emoji everywhere, just absolutely everywhere, all throughout the 90-minute event. The file barely runs when you open it now because it's got crabs. And I'll admit, I was a little bit annoyed when running the event because it wasn't going to plan. But you know what? People were having fun. People bond over not following directions. The beautiful thing here, the silver crab lining, is that we can have anime memes and crappy doodles and 2 billion crab emojis because we feel comfortable with each other. It was okay that people got distracted. I wasn't there to run a meeting. To create closeness, make something that people can bend and break and make their own, and they'll bond over it. This is a candid photo from midway through the event. People look engaged, and I'm sorry if I didn't get your best angle, but this is honestly the most that I could ask for, even if they were engaged in adding crabs. Being in person would have meant allowing time for side conversations, even if it wasn't the main goal of the event. To digitize a physical space, you have to allow room for anything to happen. If you can't treat it like a task to be done, you have to treat it like a place that you can make yourself at home. And in a weird way, I do kind of see Figma here as a home, crabs and all. In replicating this physical space, it's less about the polish and the bevels and the drop shadow and the perfection of it. It's about allowing room for growth. Figma is a place because we're able to prescribe comfort and purpose to a bunch of pixels, even if it's not material. So that is one weird tradition down, one more to go. Story 4, The Mystery of Everson Manor, was actually also made in place of a Blueprint tradition, though with more creative freedom and different takeaway, and ultimately being opened up to the public. In October of last year, I put together an interactive escape room in Figma, located at bit.ly/figmaescape. It combined illustrations and writing through a series of puzzles that you solve by interacting with a duplicated file. Though initially for Blueprint, the project expanded to something huge that I'm very much proud of. The escape room was one event we held in our fall virtual retreat. In the context of college clubs, retreats are these big trips you have at the start of the semester that help members bond and develop relationships. We, like many orgs, typically go to some Airbnb in the middle of the woods, and these trips are really fun, and there was a very high bar to reach for a virtual substitute. So that's where the idea of an escape room came in. I visited 1 or 2 escape rooms before and found that trapping yourself in a locked room with other people and having a timer over your head is a fantastic way to bond with each other. Various online escape rooms had also cropped up since the start of quarantine using hyperlinks or Google Forms to progress. To make a long-ish, meaningful bonding event for Retreat, I decided to create an escape room from scratch. As a heads up, if you ever want to play this file because it's on community, there may be some spoilers if you read deeply into the next few slides. But let me make it clear, I am not a puzzle master. I started out by making physical paper notes, sketches, and doing research about escape room puzzles. One real-world parallel of Figma versus a series of Google Forms is creating multiple ways to progress. I couldn't expect every player to have the same train of thought when given a whole file to explore, and I had to offer alternative paths for when people felt stuck. There needed to be a starting point, multiple branching paths, and a converging endpoint. There needed to be interactivity and choice. This project suddenly felt so much bigger and freeform than anything that I'd done before. And as I finished those puzzle mechanics and started illustrating, I realized also that making the assets and incorporating components felt really different from that Animal Crossing project we talked about before. Instead of practice, sketchbooks, and stumbling, it felt like I'd already acquired that set of tools I needed to build that project. Although everything is practice, Everson Manor internally felt like a chance to use the skills that I had practiced over the past few months and really experiment. I honestly felt very clever with some of what I did. I used components, pre-variants, to let players interact with items like doors and chests. And spoiler alert, if you ever want to do it, I had a trick where you change the background color to unlock one of the clues. And though different, I do also want to touch on the non-Figma part of the project. Expanding the experience to include writing was a lot of fun. I made a lot of sonnets and short links, all the text combined into world building. Matching the voice to the visual style and tying multiple platforms together really enforced that I was creating something big beyond just one file. I finished the project the night before the event, and I had no idea what to expect. I was a little bit extremely stressed, but it wound up being really, really rewarding. I jockeyed the competing teams by popping into breakout rooms to give hints, and watching the teams playing something I made from scratch was really surreal. I crafted a really deliberate experience, and it paid off a lot in the stressful perseverance, the aha moments, and the friendly fire, and the cheers when people got to finish it. Everson Manor was really, really important to me because I proved I can see a major project all the way through, that I can apply my skills into something that felt significant. That said, there's a lot of room for improvement, starting first with everyone who I haven't emailed back. If any of you in the audience had done this file already and filled out my feedback form, thank you. I appreciate you very much, and I will email you back one day. When I get a chance, I really intend to revamp the weak puzzles, update into variants, fix naming conventions, and possibly make a prototyped interactive components version. And with the upcoming features coming up, maybe even encourage using Figma Audio to complete the puzzles. With this toolbox mindset, level of polish, and that perspective on growth, I see Figma here as a studio. It's a place to put your skills to use and make something that didn't exist before. Once you put in that practice and that time it takes to learn the tools, you can really bring anything to life from a blank file. And that sentiment is something that I want everybody to feel. And it's something that we stress a lot in Story 5, a class called Figma Decal. You can find more about us at bit.ly/Figma Decal. A decal is a student-led class at UC Berkeley, and it means democratize education. I started the course like many other decal instructors because the school doesn't have a formal design major. A lot of the design community at Cal is student-driven and led, and this course is no exception. And I honestly started it on a little bit of a whim. I sent a Slack message and I got more than one positive reaction, so I immediately poured all of my energy into making it happen. A major shout out specifically to Elizabeth Wu for writing the syllabus with me on the shortest of notice, which was no easy task. Because how do we condense everything you need to know about Figma into just 12 weeks? Well, if you put it that way, you can't. Instead of making a course that crammed as much information as possible into 12 lectures, we built around 3 key course objectives. Number 1, become comfortable using Figma to pursue your ideas. Becoming comfortable doesn't mean knowing every little trick, but instead being able to leverage Figma as a tool for whatever you want. Number 2, create a community and improve collaboration skills. Get those soft skills to navigate varied and virtual team environments. And number 3, develop a sense of design with a critical lens. Be able to give and receive critique and have confidence in the work that you make. So with those goals to build towards, our team of student TAs and instructors started developing curriculum. Each week has 1 lecture, homework, and lab, and a huge emphasis on creating engaging and applicable activities. It's almost impossible to learn a tool or software entirely from lectures. Like we saw before, you learn by doing, not by listening. And I personally worked on the week 1 content, the beginner's content, that focused on navigation and the selection tool. Parts were actually inspired by different tutorials or activities that I'd personally done or seen before, including Lunacy's onboarding and Elizabeth Lynn's work with Lambda School. In retrospect, a lot of the content that we made was a result of hindsight. We knew what would work based on what we had and hadn't done when we were personally learning. And by streaming on Twitch and making our content accessible, we really do hope to grow community. Our current capacity is limited and kind of focusing on our registered students, but we do hope to focus on building community soon. Beyond just numbers, we want to engage with students and be able to learn from everyone. As with any subject, teaching helps reinforce skills that we already have, but what's more exciting is how we learn from each other. We each have slightly different backgrounds in Figma, spanning from auto layout pros to slide deck wizards to UI designers to vector illustrators. And there's nothing wrong with the fact that we're not all of them. We're not all perfect at every skill right now. That's impractical. But we are getting there as we learn from each other's content and experiences every single week. Our staff has been so wonderful all semester, and I genuinely cannot thank them enough. In a short time, they've made a super comprehensive curriculum and absolutely stellar branding. They put so much care into these students, and I love them very, very much for trusting me enough and dedicating so much time and energy into this course. And as we approach the summer, we have plenty of updates that we want to make before our next semester of class. One unique thing about Figma is when you teach it, you have to continuously update the curriculum as features are released. We'll already have to add a section on bullets and interactive components, and from today, FigJam, Figma Audio, anything else that is released between now and September, we have to additionally add content, and that's really exciting. And on top of those content reviews, we'll spend the summer improving execution, cleaning up the general files, and engaging with our community. And while this certainly is my most straightforward lesson today, it's undeniable that Figma can be a classroom and the subject. Learning by teaching is an endless cycle. There's always something new that you haven't noticed, and you can learn from somebody else. So if there's one thing that you take away from today, one phrase that you remember from this whole talk, it's this: Figma is a space for anything and everything. And when I say that, I really mean it. The sky is the limit. There's a whole slew of random files I didn't get to talk about today, including memes, scrapbooks, study guides, game shows, anything you want. Don't be afraid to be silly. Don't be afraid of a scrappy little file. And don't be nervous about having imperfections, because that's where you grow the most. Just to recap those lessons once more, all on the table, with the Animal Crossing character maker, we found that Figma is a sketchbook to learn by doing. With IDOT, we saw workspaces as playgrounds to create thoughtful chaos in. During Blueprint's Welcome on the Glade, Figma was a virtual home to create comfort and purpose while we're apart. And for Everson Manor, Figma is a studio where you can bring something to life. And finally, Figma is both the classroom and the subject of Figma Decal, where you learn by teaching, by learning, by teaching, and so on and so forth. And let's even break those down into just 3 things. Number 1, master the toolbox. Learn the hard skills through practice, videos, friends, resources, maybe even come to Figma Decal. Get comfortable with what you think you need to learn. Number 2, get others involved. Explore the community. Get friends and family to critique. Make things for other people instead of for yourself. And number 3, use what you make. Whether it's a prototype or a lesson or a file or something else, honestly, design is one half and experience is the other. To everyone here today, whether you've never opened a new file or if you are Dylan Field and you were watching this, I challenge you to create something in Figma that you'd never think to create. Something different from what you always do. Embrace silliness and chaos and change and create something unexpected. Thank you so much.